Okay, so I thought I would have a quick go at this little chord sheet from your, I think it was, you said you were grandpa. Um, so it's in cut time. I'm not gonna play it as fast as that would imply. There's other stuff here. Normally you'd want a little more style marking, I guess. Uh, I can't tell, is that Cyrillic? I can't read the text above and below to give me any indications of what was going on. I suspect this was a sketch, not meant to be played necessarily, more like maybe he had an idea for a piece of music and he wanted to get the chords down quickly, and he probably had the melody in his head, but like the amount of time it takes you to write something in explicit notation versus just getting the chords down and then notating the melody and the details later. So this was probably just a sketch. Maybe there was a finished version, maybe there wasn't. But let's look at these chords. I'll try to read through these slowly. So, obviously, he's got the slash marks to show where the chord changes happen. So we got 2 beats on the E flat, 2 beats on the E flat 7, then this, and is that a B flat 7? And then repeating that bar. Is that a A? It's hard to know. This is a problem that comes from common practice theory versus more contemporary theory, and it's hard to know without knowing a little more background about your grandpa's training. There's a problem in common practice theory. They will use this notation. So like if I'm doing an inversion, so I have C major, you probably can't see my hands, but that's fine. So C major, C, E, G, and if you're in first inversion, they would write it as, well, they would usually say, okay, it gets really complicated. So if I'm in C major, in the key of C major, they would say this is the 1 chord. If I was in first inversion, they would call it the 1/6 chord. And the 6 comes from counting the intervals down from the root to the lowest bass note. So in this case, the E. So the E up to that C. And the inversions are marked that way. The problem is that a C6 chord, as you would write it in contemporary theory, would be C, E, G with the A, which is the 6th scale degree for that. So it's a very different thing between playing C with an E on the bottom or playing a C6 chord that has that A in it. That makes it complicated in terms of how we read notation. And then making it worse is the issue with sevenths. I've run into this way too many times with my classically trained colleagues. And, I'm classically trained too, but they only have that and they never got the contemporary side. The problem is in common practice theory, they basically never learned 7th chords. The only 7th chord you would learn is like the 5/7 in a key. It's the only one that has the 7th on it to them. And because of the way they use Roman numeral notation for their chords, if you had a 1/7 and you're in the key of C, that 1/7 is the C major 7, which is a different chord quality. That's a C dominant 7, that's a C major 7. But they assume that the key that they're in dictates any of that. In contemporary theory, that's not the case. Every chord symbol is an island unto itself. This gives me the suspicion that your grandfather was writing this more in the contemporary style because he has a mixture of 7th chords that I assume are dominant 7th chords. So because of that, I'm going to assume that this is an A minor 6 chord. So rather than being an A minor in inverted in first inversion, because the way that normally would be written in contemporary theory, you would use slash notation to show what the bass chord, the bass note is after the chord. So if I had that C, instead of writing C6, I would write C/E, and then I know that the E is in the bass. And that actually gives you a lot more freedom, because what if I want C over a non-chord tone like F? And that actually happens a lot if you're playing contemporary styles. You'll run into things where they have the 5 chord frequently is basically the 4 chord over the 5 chord. So I'd have a F over G. You hear that a lot. Anyway, huge aside. Hopefully, I'm giving a little context to this, but let's get back to the spot here. I'm going to start back at the double bar. I guess it's after the intro there. So we're on that E flat major or a minor. Okay. Guys, stop talking. A lot of ways you could interpret this. And then that. Pretty stark chord changes there. And there's a lot you can do with the voice leading between these chords to come up with better voice leading than what I have, and it can imply different melodies. So here, he very explicitly put the it's on the sixth system. He explicitly put that A flat on the 3rd beat. So his slash notation gives you a really good indication of where that's at. So, so leading into that, I've got that B flat 7 from the previous. And then this, everything, it's one beat per chord. Let's see if I can read through. Oh, this is quick. That's a really interesting little set of changes there. I think I missed that. Oh. It's been A flats up till now, or A flat minors up till now. So, okay, let's try to get that. Nice little turnaround there. So, that whole system. Which I slowed down a lot for. And like I said, it's marked in cut time, so I assume it's probably a lot more. And a lot of times, especially with things, popular music, you know, if you're looking at jazz lead sheets, they're frequently going to have things at the top, they'll say ballad or whatever. And then that gives me a huge amount of information, or Latin, you know, something like that. It gives me bossa nova. Those things give me a huge amount of information about what comping style I want to use, like what actual rhythm do I use. Because, you know, I'm ballad, I'm going to do something like that, you know, but if it's a bossa nova, that kind of stuff, you know, or rock, you know, that kind of stuff. So it really that's what gives you a lot of stuff. So this isn't giving a lot of information to go on unless there's something in that Cyrillic. I assume that's Cyrillic, or it's just handwriting I can't read. Whatever's in there, maybe that's giving a little more information. But as is, there's not enough information for me to know how it's comped, other than the fact that it's in cut time. You know, so you might have like a, I don't know. I'm back at the top now. Ooh. Yeah. Oh, sorry. 4th system. Yeah. Why I want to add a major 7 there. So at the double bar. So if you know more about like the styles um, that he played in, that might give you a clue. You know, a lot of people play in specific styles, or they tend to write things out, or they kind of have go-to comping patterns. I mean, I absolutely do have go-to comping patterns. If you have any of that information, it could give you a lot more idea of what this was supposed to sound like. So anyway, hopefully any of that was helpful. I am really sad to hear, honestly, about your brother, because I ranted about this enough in another post in this thread. It's a real problem that pianists in particular are not taught to do this. This is easy conceptual stuff, and even when you're taught theory in college, where people are paying a huge amount of money most of the time to get this education, they're not being taught to read this. They're not even taught the correct theory, which I outlined the issues about the Roman numeral notation for inversions creates a problem where they don't understand whether something's an inversion or if it's an actual sixth chord, which is a different type of chord. And then there's the issue with sevenths and being able to understand them. Beyond that, I guess it's a good thing that there's no ninth chords in here, because your brother probably has no concept of ninth chords, because that doesn't fit in common practice theory. And then there's also the issue that I always have, that theory is not taught in a practical manner. It's never taught applicably, where you're actually putting it on an instrument. And so many of the concepts taught in theory are taught poorly and wrongly. The big one starting out is you're taught ostensibly about voice leading, but you're taught about it from the point of view of Bach chorales. So you learn about part writing rules, and this is what gets in people's heads. They get obsessed with the rules. Oh, I can't have parallel fifths. I can't have, direct octaves, things like this. It's not about the rules. The important part is the voice leading. How smoothly are these voices moving, instead of me going from a C down to a G and making these big jumps, I have this smooth where I'm moving the least amount of distance between adjacent chords. That's the important part of voice leading, but it usually gets mired in this idea of part writing rules, which only apply if you're trying to write chorales in the style of Bach, hundreds of years ago. It's not relevant to how we use voice leading now, and often you can't see the forest for the trees in the way that it's taught. The important part is the voice leading, and that applies to everything all the way through contemporary music. But no, this stuff needs to be taught in a context where people are actually putting it into practice. It's so sad that theory is taught in this way, where you're sitting there in front of a sheet of paper and you don't know what any of it sounds like. At least pianists have the advantage where they can sit down and play it. Other instrumentalists don't even have the functional piano skills to be able to do that. So they really are looking at abstract things on paper that have no relation to sound. And a lot of times it becomes difficult to interpret a piece of music based on that. If you're just looking at the notation, you don't actually always know functional relationships, with Roman numerals, because things can function in multiple ways, especially when things are being borrowed from different keys and you're sharing those kinds of things. Once you get out of purely diatonic music, you can't always know, and you don't know the composer's intent, and the Roman numeral analysis can really fall apart there. But it makes me really sad how many musicians have this problem. And, I got out of college. I wasn't a pianist when I got out of college, but I ended up in a career as a pianist, and I had to teach myself all of the jazz and contemporary theory from scratch myself, and pick up the piano skills myself, and pick up comping myself. And the thing that I ended up finding out is, I'm working with people who have a master's, multiple degrees in music, but I'm also working with people who just learned guitar in their bedroom, and they've had no formal training. And those people were better functional musicians than the people with advanced degrees, because school does such a poor job of teaching the actual skills that anybody actually needs um, to be, a career musician. So I could rant about that all day, but the thread really makes me sad, and it's sad to hear that your brother's in that situation, and um, he really needs to supplement that. I will say that. I don't know what his goal is in the long term, but he really, really needs to supplement what he's learning, because they are not teaching him even a fraction of the skills necessary to be a functional musician in the world. So, anyway, I'm going to stop ranting, and hopefully any of this was moderately insightful.